I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show.
Hey everyone, I'm Amy Jo's AI agent Renegade Rocks, and I'll be your host this week. On today's episode of Why Not Now, Amy Jo chats with 12 times New York Times bestselling author and award-winning keynote speaker, Don Yaeger. To say Don has a way with words would be an understatement. And this conversation is filled with incredible stories, told in a way that only he can. Here's Don Yaeger.
Don, welcome to the Why Not Now show. In the spirit of Why Not Now, let's hop in. I'm so grateful to have you here. And can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now? We will dissect that delta between idea and action and really understand how you navigated from idea to action.
Awesome. I without question, Amy Jo, I love the question because it forced me to actually dig in and find something really unique that I hope would be an offering worth your conversation. But like you, over the years, because of the number of people we interact with, there had always been folks who had said, you should start a podcast to me. And I just didn't want to do it. I mean, I wish I'd started it when you did. I wish I'd started it when some of the others did, because there was so much good content that was developed over the time by people like you. But I held off. I kept saying, you know what? They're going to expect me to have, Michael Jordan on this week and Magic Johnson on next week, and that won't really work for me. I didn't want to do it. But then one day I was reading an article, and it jumped out at me. The article was ESPN had commissioned through their ESPNW channel, their women's channel, commissioned EY to do a research project asking the top women CEOs, those women who are in the C-level positions, not just CEOs, but C-suite positions at Fortune 500 companies, and looking for common ground. What did they most have in common? And the number one thing was that they played sports. 94% of the women at the C-suite level of Fortune 500 companies had played sports. And I thought, that's really awesome. I bet you that would be a really great conversation to go find some of those women, ask what sports taught them. But then it's a lot of things. It became an article that I cut out and tacked on a board and said, one day I'll get to that. And then one day the pandemic came, and we all were shut down, right, from our speaking and other things. And the last thing the world needed in the pandemic was one more podcast. But there was this unique idea tacked to my wall, and so Why Not Now really became for me the window is open. My guess is guests will be open as well, because I'm not asking them to dig into their profit and loss statement. I'm not asking them to answer why something happened in their company. I'm literally asking, what did sports teach you to make you a better leader? And from that came the Corporate Competitor podcast. And in the for almost 5 years since, we've interviewed everybody from Condoleezza Rice to, I've got Amy Jo Martin coming up on my podcast. I've had all the big names, right? But it's also included the CEOs of Delta, Ed Bastian, the CEO of Disney, the CEO of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan, CEO of Target, Brian Cornell. All these leaders were just, athletics played a role in their development. And I realized I'd been asking these questions of folks for so many years, but I'd never been recording them to share in a podcast format. So my why not now was that moment when I said, there's this fantastic opportunity for me to learn and share that learning with other people. But at the same time, it kind of fell in a window of time in which I realized I could create something unique, and I didn't want to be a podcast like everybody else's. I wanted it to have a very narrow swim lane, if you will, that I could try to put people into and enjoy.
And here you are, and it's, I loved hearing from you, learning from you. We both spoke recently at an event at MIT, the Gathering of the Titans. And I mean, I just want to touch on all the things that I learned from you in your keynote session. And that is, I'm going to put that here, but before we get there, because the world needs to hear that message from you and the tactics, and just it's perfectly timed on teams and navigating in the 1%. But can you give us the quick movie trailer of how we got to, even when you and I met? I remember you sharing with me about the podcast during the pandemic timeframe, but this like ultimate career that you had. And I'm excited to eventually dive into what that means for journalism now and AI and writing. But let's just touch on the high pillars and those big landmarks in your life.
Yeah, I was a journalist, as you said. I came out of college, Ball State University, fighting cardinals. Be worried, be frightened. The cardinal will peck at your ear if you aren't careful. I just worked at several newspapers. Started in San Antonio, just south of you, there in Austin, and it went to the Dallas Morning News, and then became the political editor of a large paper in Florida. And I loved writing. I loved telling stories. And then I got the ultimate opportunity to go to work at Sports Illustrated, where I think is the greatest storytelling organization on the planet when I had the opportunity to be there. I did that job for 12 years. Pretty incredible to get a chance to be engaged with the best of the best on a daily basis. And then Sports Illustrated was looking to make a shift because of the economy changing in the 2008 window. They offered an early retirement package. I took it because I wanted to keep writing. I wanted to start writing books, and I've now had the opportunity to do books with everybody from Walter Payton. I lived with Walter for the last few weeks of his life while he was dying, to Deion Sanders, whose book I wrote last year, and written 42 books now. Crazy. 12 New York Times bestsellers, and in the process of all that, started doing, like you, some corporate speaking, and that has blossomed as well. So I'm between speaking, podcasting, and writing books. That's my full plate these days.
No big deal. No big deal, right? Yeah. Well, I look at like your years of listening, learning, walking the planet in spaces and places that most people would love to have been a fly on the wall, and all this data that you have absorbed and written about and consumed, and the ability then to shift these big lessons of the ultimate goats to the ultimate business goats and helping them become higher performers. Can you share a little bit about, let's just say 2 or 3 of the key tactics and concepts and tactics that have really translated the most? And your storytelling is remarkable too. So if there's a story involved in where the genesis of a lesson was able to surface and then transfer into a bigger, more scalable impact on our business world, I'd love to hear that too. I know you have them. But yeah, what were some of the starting places where you thought to yourself, oh, I remember listening to Michael Jordan one day, and then this and this happened, and wow, they could use this over here.
Well, I will tell you that very early on, as a journalist, I was being asked by journalism schools to come talk to young students about how to practice the craft. And one of the early things I developed was a series of concentric circles, because I believe the greatest fail most people have is they don't know their audience. They don't know who they're getting at. And sometimes your audience is one, right? It's you and I right now. We could say you're my audience, or I could know your audience better. But how can I know my audience well enough? So that's the outer circle. How do I know who they are and research them in some way? So that the second circle is that I can then find a point of connection. So there's somewhere where we have something in common, because finding common ground allows us. Now, you're not big famous Amy Jo Martin, and I'm just Don Yaeger, right? We're now a little closer to eye. We're peer to peer when that happens. And when you do those two things, you then get an opportunity to ask better questions, to be heard differently, right? If you've created those, if you know the audience, create common ground and do that. And one example that I often share was an opportunity I had a few years ago. And you named him already, Michael Jordan. Jordan was turning 50 years old, invited a handful of journalists to spend the day with him. I happened to be one. And I could go and just ask Michael Jordan what it's like to be, what's it like to wake up at 50 years old. Does it hurt more than it did at 25, or some silly question like that? But instead, in my study of Jordan, and I knew him already, but in my study of content around him, I noticed that he had this very challenged relationship with his father, but he never explained what the root of the challenge was. And so I decided that's the outer ring. So I decided, second ring, common ground, to share with him when we're one on one about my challenged relationship with my father. My father was a preacher. It often felt like when things were going wrong at our house, he was down the street trying to fix somebody else's house. And he should have been and as a kid, I always thought he should have been at my house working on our family's issues when he was busy fixing everybody else. And so, in this small little way, Michael Jordan and I had something in common, right? I can't do almost anything else he can do. But in this little way, we both just desperately wanted our father's love and affection.
Right. It's
And we could not figure out how to get it. And that opened the door for me to ask Michael a question. I said, Michael, was there ever a moment with your father when something was said or something happened that left a scar that you still think of today? And you can't ask that question if you haven't done the outer work, right? Jordan proceeded, and sometimes I play this for audiences because it was recorded. Jordan proceeded over the next couple minutes to tell me a story about his father and how he desperately wanted his dad's attention. So he goes out, he's 10 years old. His dad's working on a car. His dad thought Michael was always just playing, like he had no future because he just played sports. But the father thought real industry was done under a car, right? Real work was done by real men out in a garage. And so Jordan's out trying to get his father's attention. Father recognizes that, asks him to hand him a wrench, and Jordan doesn't know what that wrench should look like because he's never out there. He gives him the wrong wrench, and the father rolls out from under the car and looks at Jordan and says, I don't know why you're out here. You don't belong here. Why don't you go in and hang out with the ladies? And he sends Jordan out of the garage. And Jordan would go on to tell me that he spent the rest of his life trying to get his father to say, I'm proud of you, right? And you want to know what created the greatest basketball player of all time, maybe the greatest athlete of all time? Was this passion to try to get that from his father. And that answer, Jordan said to me, he'd been asked the question 100,000 times and never answered it. But it only occurred because the study was done, the connection was built, we had something in common, and a question could be asked that otherwise couldn't be asked. So how do you, if you're trying to become best in class in interviewing or in speaking or whatever it is, what effort are you putting into knowing your audience? And in today's day and age, it's so easy to get to know things about people, that if you're not spending a little time trying to know your audience, it's really on you.
Wow. I love that story on so many levels. I mean, I know you and I have talked about that edge of these athletes we've both interfaced with and gotten to know so well. We're A-list celebrities or could be CEOs and that edge, learning, like you said, that drive, for sure. There was fuel from that discovery that you were able to make, that he wouldn't talk about, and how human yet, unrelatable Michael Jordan has felt to most of us, but being able to bridge that because of your personal story too is really, really cool. And for anyone listening too, it's, if you're familiar with his mom and the impact that she then had on his life. Incredible to see, the difference in how much we've heard about her, whether it be documentaries or it's, the film. But really there was this underlying drive and push, it sounds like, this fuel that when you translate that to, everyone who right now, if they don't feel like they can find the common ground, they can do the surface layer research, they can use AI, they can just try and force it, but that feels forced. What do you suggest in those moments? Because there's always sometimes you kind of have to talk to someone to find it.
Yeah, there's more common. We share more in common than we don't, I believe, right? I think
I do too.
but our human nature kicks in. We all struggle with some of the same things. We've all battled with some of the same demons. We've all faced a challenge that there is some similar. It may not be perfectly linear, but there is something similar between us that allows us to, for a short window of time, walk in each other's shoes. And that's all we're looking for. Like I said, I don't have anything else in common with Michael Jordan. Though I love basketball, play it all the time, still to this day. But I struggle because I was looking for a way to have something in common with a guy who's the greatest of all time. And that's really hard to do. So yeah, it's work, but I think it's there for most of us.
I love that. And I think too, as the journalist in that case, or whoever not the recipient, but the person that's trying to connect, we also have to have enough confidence in that the other person will show up and will be able to bring out some human nature that they'll want to or feel that connection, right? Like, you're putting yourself out there. If you said that to him and you were a little bit, you might have thought, what do I have to lose? What do I have to lose? But yes, you were vulnerable.
Yeah. And again, you're playing to human nature. People, when they know that you have offered up a piece of yourself that they can relate to, they are grateful for that and are willing to reciprocate most often. And so, again, I'm playing to human nature. That's a real key to all of this. And Amy Jo, I think your messaging for so many of your guests and listeners is true. Is you is this exact point? You have to open yourself up in some way. You have to be human if you want them to be human too, right? And I will tell you, I do the same thing. When I'm out speaking to companies, I'll ask the company to give me a list of a handful of folks who will be in the room. I'll study the list. I'll go on and do quick searches of LinkedIn profiles or social media, or if there's company bios, to try to look at and see, so that if I encounter somebody before the speech, I might say, oh yeah, I saw that you went to Miami of Ohio University. I went to Ball State. We're Mid-American Conference people. I mean, that's not really that close a connection, but what does it immediately say to that person? The guy that's going to be the speaker took a minute to study and learn something about me, and I immediately become their favorite speaker because
You're listening, you care.
nothing makes someone more interested in you than when they find out you've shown interest in them.
So in that case, with, let's say, Michael Jordan, your vulnerability gave him the psychological safety to share with you something he had never shared in any interview
Right.
during his entire career. That is really cool. That, when we let's talk about the 1%. I've heard you talk about the 1% a lot. And how do you describe this concept, not only from what you've seen and being exposed to such great talent in sport, in any way, but also when it comes to teams in the corporate scenario?
I think the best, it's seldom, and this might sound antithetical to people, because we might want to look and say, well, Michael Jordan was the best, because he could fly, and it felt like or Shaq was the best because whatever it was, we can give them their physical gift as their reason for greatness. Not a single. I had the opportunity over a 30-year career to ask 2,500 of the best of all time, if you could name one habit that gave you a competitive advantage over other people, what would the habit be? And not a single one of them pointed to their physical gifts, because they always knew there was someone bigger, faster, stronger. But what they knew was they were creating a mental strength that gave them. So I argue that the best of all in corporate business, corporate sports, the military, you name it, the best of all are stronger here than anywhere else. They're stronger between their ears than anywhere else.
I love that. I was going to turn the tables and ask that as the final question to you, but how do you answer that? Right? If I were to flip the question, what is, yeah.
I would tell you that mine has been a voracious, I pay voracious attention to my inner circle, who I give my time to. I guard it very carefully. I'm thoughtful about it consistently. Who am I giving my time to? Because I know that, as you love to say, right? It's the currency. That is what it's the one currency you have control over. And if I'm giving my time to people that are dragging me down, if I'm giving my time to people who are busy making me kind of wander into negative spaces, I find that's on me, right? That's my choice. And if I can better, so I was challenged by a basketball coach named John Wooden many years ago when he and I were, well, I don't know. I mean, he and I were working on a book together, and he actually drew two lines down a sheet of paper one day, and he challenged me to go back to my hotel that night, and in the first column, write down the 5 people I gave my time to in my business life. Who are the people I spend my most time with in business? Middle column, 5 people in your personal life. Who do you spend your time with? Third column, some other social setting, whether it's church or whatever it might be, some other social setting. And then he said, look at those 15 names tonight as you're sitting in your hotel room, and ask yourself, name by name, are they going where I'm going? Are they encouraging? Are they helpful in me achieving the kinds of things I believe I'm here to achieve? And if they're not, it's your job to scratch them from the list and
Right.
move new people onto your list. And so that one act is something I do every year on December 31st. I evaluate my inner circle. And other people do, resolutions. I just look at my circle and I ask myself, is this the traveling team I want to be on? And
Yeah. Starting 5.
are they making me better? And because if they are, I'm making them better too, by the way. And so that's really awesome.
That is cool. That is cool. I recently was thinking about, this concept of personal board of directors and how it's okay to have an open seat every once in a while. It's okay to be kind of looking around and seeing who's going to, you don't have to have
That's a great line.
someone filling a seat just because there are, let's say, 5 or whatever. And it makes us stretch and kind of think who else could be, if it's open versus it's kicking someone out. But I love that.
I looked at on my personal side the very first time I did this. Hope she doesn't listen to your podcast, but she might. My older sister, right, was someone who every time I talked to her, it felt like I was talking to Eeyore,
Yeah.
oh, my life is bad. I hate my job. I hate, and everything was always about what she just didn't like about her life, and she was never going to fix it. All she was going to do was complain about it. And I realized I would give up time all the time to talk to somebody who at the end of the conversation, I would be drained. I would be exhausted and I did nothing, right? And
Yeah.
she's my sister. I can't get rid of her, right?
Yep.
Does it give you energy? Does it take your energy?
Yeah.
What I could do is reduce the amount of time I was spending there and increase the amount of time I was spending with someone else. Can't get rid of her, but I can make a different seat in my five of my
Mhm.
of my family life that became a kind of a more encouraging soul.
I love that. It's so relatable too, and I appreciate you sharing that because so many people feel like those five in their those are the stuck seats, right? You don't have agency to shift, and it's like, nope, that's not the case. Life is too short. We vote with our time. So the 1% and compounding 1%, and I think of you and what you've shared in the past, how that 1% better or compounding the 1%. How does that apply in the business world, or how are you seeing that right now as you're traveling around?
Well, I think where again, there are two words that are important. It's intentional, right? You got to be intentional thinking about what is my point of improvement today? What will I be better at today, either through study or practice? What will I be better at? It's got to be intentional, and it's got to be intellectually part of your conversation that you're having with yourself and with others. Like you should be challenging others too. What are you going to get better at today? And if there's and at the end of the day, there's a required evaluation. Did I said at the beginning that this is what I was going to do. At the end of the day, did I actually improve? Have I improved? Because if I have, and that
Yeah.
improvement sticks, what I roll into tomorrow is just
Yeah.
I'm better, right? And tomorrow I get to start something new, and I'll be better
Yeah.
again and better again, and you start refreshing and getting better all the time at just that in micro segments of your being. What you find is that you at the end of the day, at the end of a week, your life is changing, and it
Yeah.
will change right before your eyes.
It really is. I'm thinking of Greg or essentialism with just the consistency compounding over time and the
By the way, real quick, I hate to interrupt you, but you just hit on a really great point, consistency. So if I get better at this one thing today, but tomorrow I fall back into my old habit because I'm trying to get better on something else,
Yeah.
then I'm not really better, right?
Yeah.
I have to be good at something, whether it's a moment of study, whether it's
Yeah.
a moment of communication. If I'm going to be better, I have to carry that through the next day and the day after that. It can't be something you get better at so temporarily it's because you're moving on to get better at something else.
Right.
Then there's no compounding interest.
Yeah.
right, exactly. And then
Sorry.
no, absolutely. I think that concept is, the romanticism, especially of social media or the before after contrast that we see, whether it's in business or in health or it's the side by side. It just seems like, how could that work? But it really is. You look at the greats and it is the brick by brick, day by day, stacking days, consistency, because that nature is just, let's just do all the things, right? We can do all these things 1%. Actually, you really can't. No, that's not how it works. So with teams, like some of my favorite stories of yours, Don, are when you would realize things about certain very specific special teams, moments in time, and then dissect what was it about that crew. Sometimes it might seem obvious on the outside, but that really wasn't the thing. Or it's just like, who knows? And you just went like a scientist and just looked into them. Do you have one story that comes to mind?
I think the story that you heard that you might be searching for right here is one that I love to tell, and it was about USA Olympic basketball team.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
Obviously, many people will remember, if you're old enough, the Dream Team, right? The team that many people will consider the greatest team of all time in the history of sports. They had just so much to do, so much to prove, and they did so, right? But just a decade after the Dream Team, USA Basketball had gone from the best of all time to sixth in the world because they lost their sense of purpose. They were no longer, they were, they weren't playing for their country. They weren't playing for the letters on their chest. Um, Often they were playing as much as anything for Nike because Nike was paying them to be on international teams, right? And so the sense of purpose that drew that dream team together had dissipated. So they bring in a new coach, Mike Krzyzewski from Duke, Coach K. And Coach K comes in and he starts asking, how do I reestablish this sense of purpose? How do I give them something to play for that's different, something to work for that gives them a different sense of being? And he started asking who else in the world, wears letters on their chest, but does so for a different reason. And he started introducing the basketball team to members of the United States military, soldiers, men and women, wearing the letters USA on their chest. He would take them to different places to introduce them, and we bring in wounded warriors to talk to the team about what it meant to care for the person next to you so deeply that you would dive on a grenade to save their life, right? And then you translate that into the simple world of basketball, and suddenly basketball almost seems meaningless, but playing for your country becomes meaningful. Creating that sense of why, that you feel who you're in service of, you feel why what you do matters. And it came to a head on the eve of the London Olympics. He took the team to Arlington National Cemetery. And while they're at the Arlington Cemetery, three of the best players, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Kobe Bryant, were given the honor of presenting the wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And shortly after that, General Martin Dempsey, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, takes the players and walks them through Arlington to tell them stories about who was buried there, who had served their country there. And after a little bit, he says, would you walk with me to Section 60? Section 60, the freshest graves at Arlington. They're where the men and women who most recently given their lives for U.S. interest were laid to rest. And I talked to several players who made that trip, and as they were walking through that portion of the cemetery, they were looking down birth dates younger than theirs, hometowns they recognized. But nobody knew exactly what to do. They were kind of gathered together, everybody silent, when Coach saw a man standing about 150 feet away. Looked like he was probably a soldier based on his haircut. He had a backpack slung over his shoulders. And as he was moving from one grave to the next, he was reaching in the backpack, pulling out pictures, and laying them on the ground. Coach K walked over. And he's like, excuse me, sir, my name is Mike Krzyzewski. I'm the basketball coach for the USA Olympic team, but I'm wondering if you would tell me what you're doing here today. And the young man said, yes, sir, I know who you are. This was my team, as he points to the graves all around him. He said, we had a mission. It didn't go as planned. And these are pictures of me and them in better days. And Coach said, sir, would you come talk to my players? And he did. He walked over and he stood in the center of all that talent. And he started talking about caring for each other. What it meant to love each other so much you would do anything for the protection and safety of the other. And after a couple of minutes, he started talking about survivor's guilt, that he wasn't there the day the incident happened, but he wished he had been. And at that stage, he started crying, and he turned and walked away. There was this long silence, and then Coach reached in and he said, gentlemen, this is why we came here today, because I want you to feel what it means to represent the United States of America. That team went to London with that feeling within its chest, right? Forget basketball talent. Yes, they had it, but they felt different about the opportunity presented to them.
Yeah.
And they dominated their way through that Olympics onto a gold medal. If we can create feel-it environments within our workplace, and we can, by the way, because there's a reason why we come together. There's a hole in the universe we've come to solve. If we can create those feel-it moments together, we can do something special. right? Teams can
Yeah.
come together, rally together in ways that we may never have thought about before.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's so many people right now that are craving that. It feels like there's a deficit. We've got no shortage of the perfect storm, multiple generations working together, AI, mental health, and post-pandemic, but still feeling it in terms of the impact of being disconnected. So what's one thing you suggest for someone listening right now that feels that themselves with their team? And it could be a team of 2, it could be a team of 2,000, and it could even just be in a family. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a corporate dynamic, but that sense of purpose is just, there's a deficit. We've lost it. We've become complacent, like they did, like the USA basketball team had. How do they get their dream team back?
I'll tell you I'll give one quick suggestion. One way that, so even I don't learn these things to not practice them at home, right? So
Yeah.
I have a collection of employees who work with me, and one thing we do on a regular basis is we poll our employees and we say, "Hey, what's something, Amy Jo? What's something we could do in your name in the community that would make you proud to have us as your teammates? What's something we could do for you, with you, in the community that would make you proud?" And
Excellent.
and we have a feel it moment coordinator on our team, right? Someone who literally manages these questions. And then once a month, we go out on a Friday afternoon and we do something in the name of one of our teammates. And we go, and sometimes it's one of our guys I'd known for years. He'd been worked for me for 13 years. I did not know there were 2 miles of road in our community that he monthly walked and picked up cigarette butts on because he wanted those adopt a road signs that we have in our community. He wanted to have his sister-in-law's names put on 2 signs because he so loved his sister-in-laws who both died of breast cancer. And so we went and walked the 2 miles with him to pick up cigarette butts so that he knew we loved him, right? So that he knew we cared for him. And you know what? I mean, he's a guy that got job offers all the time from other people because he's that good. But he knows he's treated differently. He's a part of something special working in our team. He might make $1 more somewhere else, but he feels different about being on our team. So
Yeah.
what can you do in the name of someone on your team on a regular basis? Hey, maybe it's somebody who believes in Habitat for Humanity. So you know what? We're going to go take 3 hours on a Saturday morning, and anybody that wants to show up can, right? We'll bring food to feed people, but it's a voluntary thing. But after a while, what you find is everybody comes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody wants to be left out when it's their turn, right? They want everybody
Yeah.
there for their turn too. So everybody comes, but it's voluntary. And we just say, we're going to go build in the name of Amy Jo, as part of a Habitat event. Or we're going to go on behalf of Savannah on our team. And whatever it is, there's something out there that we're there to do in their name to honor them because we want them to know we care for them.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
That feel it relationship that exists binds us together in a way that you couldn't if you were trying to just come up with a slogan or a mantra or whatever, right?
Right.
No, it's action. People need to feel your action.
Yeah.
On behalf of each other.
That feel it moment. I love that. I love that so much. And I have to just ask, I want to get to AI in a moment, just given your world and what how you operate in your craft. But also, before we get there, can we talk about Savannah Bananas for a moment? Oh my gosh. As a marketer and come from the sports industry and entertainment and tech, I want to talk about the under the hood. You know this story and you know the phenomenon, but give me the scoop. What ingredients did they start with? I know that now it's become a more well-known story of who they are and, some of that, but what do you think that most people don't know about Savannah Bananas that that's worthy of everyone knowing, right? Like, what's the under story? And I don't mean the scoop and the gossip. I mean give us some of that formula.
For your listeners, I've written a book and I've been around the bananas for many, many years. Actually was invited to throw out the first banana at a game because everybody should throw out the first banana, forget a baseball. But so I will tell you the single most important thing that no one pays attention to that they did is really the very core of who they became. They recognized that they were in possession of a business that was struggling because people didn't want to do business with their business, right? People were starting to lose interest in baseball. Baseball has been kind of on a decline on a national level for several decades. So they're in possession of a business that is losing customers. So instead of saying, gosh, you know what, we just need to educate our customers on why we're so good, they decided to go out and ask themselves, what are the 10 things our customers least like about our business? What are the 10
They went out and asked.
They went out and they did a full-blown research, and they discovered the first thing was the games were too long. So what they did, they went out and created a baseball game that they manufactured for their fans that is only 2 hours long. Instead of a traditional 3.5 hour long baseball game, these games suddenly were 2 hours long. Now that's pretty manageable for most people, right? The second thing, they struggled with people struggle with this idea that a batter comes to the plate and he would step out of the box and he would undo their gloves, and they have all these routines that they scratch themselves a little bit probably, they whatever it was that they would do that was their little thing, and then they would do that after every pitch, which made just one pitch sequence seem like it lasted forever. So they said, by the way, if batter A steps out of the box to adjust or do anything else during that window of time, it's a strike. Like, it's a negative, right? You lose one pitch that you don't even get a chance to swing at.
Yeah,
because
rewriting the rules.
They were looking and saying the fans felt disengaged. You had all these little kids that brought their glove to the game, and while it was nice, it seldom anything really mattered. So they decided to say that if you hit a ball into the stands and a fan caught it, you're out, which meant the fans suddenly felt like they were part of the game, right? They had a role in the outcome of the game. If their favorite team was batting and the ball's coming at you, you're going to drop it because you don't want your team to get out. If the bad guys are hitting, catch the ball. Let's put them out.
Brilliant.
So they
Experiential.
looked at what are the things that were keeping people from wanting to show up at their ballparks, and they one by one they went and ticked them off. And so ask yourself that same question in your business. I run a bank. I mean, let's just say I run a bank. What are the 10 things customers hate most about dealing with a bank?
And for those who are afraid to ask the question, right? Because let's be real, it's our ego or it's the thought that if they keep these things top of mind, they're going to bounce and go somewhere else, which if they're there, they are probably likely going to bounce anyway. So it's just a matter of time. But what would be your answer to someone that just feels that is so risky? I mean, just even some of the stats of what's happened with the reinvention, it really is a reinvention, right? Not only of them, but of
baseball.
Yes.
Professional baseball. The Major League Baseball went out and said, by the way, we're going to establish a pitch clock so that it goes faster, right? They recognized that what the Savannah Bananas were doing, this goofy little baseball team in Savannah, Georgia, right, wearing bright yellow with a CEO wearing a yellow tuxedo every day, which is, it's so funny. You ask Jesse Cole, Jesse, tell me, how many of these tuxedos do you own? And he says, conservatively, 7, right? Because I have a new one for every day. But if you look at it, you go, you could dismiss them as just a goofy little baseball team. But when you start seeing that they're selling out football stadiums, right? A goofy little baseball team is putting 80,000 people in the stands to watch them. They have more social media followers than all Major League Baseball teams combined, right?
Yeah.
You start looking at that and you realize they're doing something, and we can consider them goofy. We can call them the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
We can dismiss them at our own peril, by the way, right? Or we can go figure out what of the things they're doing can we adapt. And baseball has started. I mean, the commissioner of baseball recently talked about, creating a position in a game that's called the golden bat, which is basically it's a Savannah Bananas idea where you can pick anybody you want to hit in a certain situation for your team. And, that's baseball purists are losing their minds. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, baseball purists are dying every year, and there are not enough people replacing them to make the game
Yeah.
consistent. So anyway,
I love it. I mean, people are craving to shake shit up too. It's like we need different, we need faster, we need more entertainment. We want to be involved. I think of Live Golf. It's there's still honoring of the legacy and tradition of the game. However, there has been some healthy tension, of the old guard, new guard, but I see it coming together more and more because you can't resist for very long without becoming extinct, right? Like one side is, I love it because that story applies to any company.
business. Every one of us can look and say, hey, I'm doing X. What is it that keeps people? Is it paperwork? Is it the amount? Is it the fact that they've got to go through 7 layers of a phone system in order to get to a live person? What are the things that are keeping people from enjoying our experience? Not doing business with us, because sometimes they have to, right?
Yeah.
But are they enjoying the experience? And if you start asking that question and you come up with a list and you don't take on that list, shame on you.
That's literally putting your head in the sand. You're just waiting for this to not go well over and over and over. Okay, so let's talk AI for a moment, Don. So you have an incredible career, body of work, legacy in journalism, and we now have this disruptive magic superpower called AI. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody loves it or hates it and blah, blah, blah. But I personally feel it's an accelerant of humanity in the future.
If you look at it, I think you're like that person with their head in the sand. If you look at it and say, you know what, there's nothing here I can gain, shame on you.
Well, and let's look at it through the lens of a writer, a journalist, storyteller. How are you using it, and what do you think will be the biggest challenges and opportunities in that field?
I will tell you one of the things. I was recently at a gathering of 40 really successful authors, right? And we were all sitting, and this was the topic of the 2-day conversation together. Not a big open forum. 40 successful writers all talking to each other. What are we doing? And the thing that came up most frequently is, all those people at the beginning who thought, "Oh, AI is going to replace us. We're not going to be needed anymore. They're going to get rid of us." Bottom line is that's not true, because if you do what you do really well, AI can't replace you, right? Because it can't draw. AI can't draw that answer from Michael Jordan, right?
Right.
It takes somebody making those connection points to make that happen. So once I've gathered something, how can I use the tool to make me better? And one of the things that almost all of us are doing, I was really surprised, is I might write 2-3 paragraphs, and I'll actually send it, and I'll toss it in ChatGPT and say, hey, help me improve these 3 paragraphs. How can I better say some of these points, and let ChatGPT take a shot at it. It almost always, there's something in there that I'm finding that will improve what I'm doing. It's
I
not
love that.
writing. It's not writing for me. I'm using it almost as a high level, PhD level editor that can help me better communicate my point. And I often ask it, help me take this 1,000 words and communicate the same thoughts in 900.
I love this. I love that not only from an editing and a thought partner I mean, it's really a co-author, not the Genesis native material, but from a high level editor. But also what you're saying, it can be a writing coach too, because you do that enough and it's going to be like, here are your trends. You tend to do this. You could start relearning, you could start learning, some new tactics and become better at your craft, but also unlearning some new habits that have become like maybe not great habits. And it's like a monitor, a coach of, I've noticed you started trending this way. You've been doing more of that. You've been doing more of this. It's like a self-awareness gauge.
Completely. And again, almost to the Savannah Bananas question you asked earlier. If you were to choose to say, I'm going to hope this goes away and this is a fad and whatever, and miss the moment to get better using the tool, shame on you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a 5% edge. I always say, it can become 500% so quickly. We've seen it, and nobody can really afford to be second or third or fourth in a lot of ways right now. I mean, there's always context in that, but it's things are moving too quickly that delta can get away from you overnight, and in the wrong direction too. But that's so interesting. So if we were to go back to that moment before you asked Michael Jordan the question and actually shared first your own story, right? And then you were able to connect with him in the way you were. If we were to think about that moment prior to you teeing that up, what would you say to yourself before that? Is there anything you would go back and say?
Yeah, I would. I mean, the one thing I've almost always said to myself is, I'm never embarrassed by a question I asked. I'm only embarrassed that if I'm only embarrassed if the question I asked is poor because I was poorly prepared, right? And so if somebody says, man, that's a horrible question, I don't care. Like, I believed it was worthy and I prepared for it, right? And so the only time I'm ever truly embarrassed by a question or something that I've done is if internally I know I didn't do the right amount of work before the conversation occurred. And if I've done the right preparation, if I've actually done the things I'm talking to you about, you can't shame me into feeling bad about asking any question that I do, even if it's sometimes awkward. I mean, I've asked questions of people that close friends, people I've written books with, that the question was so, and again, intentionally asked, but it caught them that they actually got up and walked out of my office. I've had it happen. But they always come back. And they come back because they know my heart was right. I wasn't asking it as in a gotcha way. I wasn't asking it to embarrass somebody. I was asking it because I'm truly curious about something. And if I bring the right heart and spirit to it, people will dig in with you. And so,
Interesting.
yeah.
I like that a lot. I like that. It makes me think about, the vulnerability you had in asking the question or just creating the statement rather, and opening that door about your childhood with your relationship with your father. And then it led to him talking about his. That's a different type of vulnerability than not being prepared. One is almost like an exposed vulnerability, unhealthy, and one is a healthy vulnerability, right? Or a prepared and not prepared. But I really appreciate that you shared that story because I think it humanized Michael Jordan in a way that maybe many don't know.
Yeah, because you could look at him and you go, man, that guy's he's a physical freak. He's unbelievable. He's this, that. No, he's what drives Michael Jordan is a passion for excellence that was rooted in wanting his father to say, good job. And we all wanted our father to say good job, by the way. All of us.
And he chose to convert it in that way. And many people may have converted it in a lot of different ways, some of which could be detrimental in and not, healthy or positive. And you could argue context of anything and semantics of anything. But it's such an interesting takeaway. And I really appreciate you, Don, for sharing and also just being a presence in my world and a friend, and your willingness to share your time and wisdom has been the highlight of my day.
Amy Jo, thank you so much. And I'm ready to continue my Why Not Now journey and keep looking for ways to grow myself. And thank you for encouraging all of us to do so.
Thank you. And before I forget, one last question, actually. When I say the word renegade, who comes to mind? I'm so curious for you because you've met so many.
So for me, I think of Richard Branson, and he's someone I've never met, but though I've never met him, I would consider him a mentor because I study him. And I think that was one of the things I learned early was that too often we think mentors have to be somebody we have a one-on-one relationship with, we get to know each other, we drink coffee. I can be mentored in this day and age by people that I'll never meet, people that maybe have passed away, if I'm willing to dig in and study. And Branson, for me, I love the way, everybody says go right. Richard Branson says, but what about left? Does anybody look? Let's look over here. See, let's peek.
Sounds like more fun too, by the way.
It's probably more fun, right?
Yeah.
And so Renegade, I think of him as somebody I've studied for years and been fascinated by.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm totally picking up what you're putting down about those kind of quiet or invisible mentors that may not know they're mentoring you, but I have them too. And thank you again for your time. And I look forward to tracking and just watching you continue to share and offer your value. And we appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you.